check with somebody?
Oh, sorry.
No, all good. Is this what I'm still supposed to be reading or doing, or has there been any change? So would you check with whomever that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be?
Yes, I will. I think I asked for Rima when she was appointed as vice chair, and Erica gave me the same information that you've been reading, but I'll see if there's any agenda for it to not be necessary or anything like that and get back to you.
Great, thank you. With that, let's see. As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
I'm here.
Ooh, not good. Can you do that again, Brooke?
Could you not hear me?
You're a robot. It's really broken up and problematic. I don't know.
Hold on.
Meg, I'll come to you.
Here.
Shanta.
Here.
Great. Brooke, come back to you.
Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Haley.
I'm here.
Vicky. Vicky, we weren't able to check your microphone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Vicky's muted. There you go.
Yeah. There she is. Okay, great. We're going to leave Tucker off because he's on the phone and we heard him already. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Anne, we have your microphone working.
Hello.
Great, thank you. And we've already heard from Billy. Moving on. Good afternoon. This is an open meeting. The Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening via video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care to not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless otherwise noted. We will now turn to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, we cover ground rules for effective, clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the floor is yielded to you before speaking your name. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. And items with public comment after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged and speak to the chair. Finally, each vote will be taken and conducted by a roll call. With that, we will move to the first item on the agenda, which I think is to call the meeting to order or an approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Haley.
Just really quickly for the agenda. I know that 7 Amelia, we're going to have to amend it to not include 7 Amelia Drive.
Okay.
And then when we get to the minutes, it says 9:13, but we're actually approving minutes from 9:20. So I just want to make note of those changes.
Great. So we will approve the agenda, moving 7 Amelia to a future time period and making that date adjustment. So, with those notes, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
And seconded?
Second.
Second from Shanta by roll call. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Shanta.
Aye.
Meg.
Aye.
And Brian's an aye. Brian Sullivan's an aye. With that, we will move to the approval of the minutes as amended to read 9. Did you say 20? Okay. So for discussion, I think Rima.
Yeah, one teeny tiny amendment at the top of the page. Attending members, Penny is listed, but she wasn't there. And she is noticed as absent, but just needs to take Penny out of the attending members.
Thank you, Rima.
Got it. I will do.
Anyone else have any comments or notes or edits to the minutes?
I'll move
Seeing none?
approval as recommended by.
Great. With the edits. So motion from Brooke to approve with the edits as suggested. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Meg by roll call. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Brooke.
Aye.
Shanta.
Aye.
Meg.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Brian Sullivan. Next item is public comment for items that are otherwise not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to make comments, or any board members as members of the public that would like to make comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period and move to applications. The first application for Bell, 9 Benjamin Drive. I've asked Rima to take over here. Mr. Bell is my son's school teacher, so I'm going to recuse for this one.
All right. Are there any comments on this application from board members? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? Anyone? Brooke, you're muted.
I clicked it one too many times. I would move to approve closing cost assistance for the Bell family at 9 Benjamin Drive up to $15,000 pending final closing costs.
Thanks. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Meg. Second, Brooke's motion. And by roll call, Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Shanta Boyes Murphy.
I have to abstain as well.
Oh, okay. And I vote aye, but that gives us only 4. Okay. Is that going to be a problem, admin?
It's only 3.
We have 3. That's only 3.
Vicky can chime in, but I mean, I think as long as the majority of those voting are voting favorably, then it stands. But Vicky, do you want to comment on that?
Oh yeah, because we have a quorum.
Yeah, so you have 4 that were attending this meeting, but you have 3 that are voting. So you're all set. You have majority of the people who are here.
All right. Good.
Yeah, 5 attendees and 3 voting affirmatively. Yeah.
Right. 5, excuse me. Yeah.
Yes, and 2 abstains. So or recuse. So that carries. Thanks. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you, everybody. The next application is for the Reed family, also 9 Benjamin Drive. It wasn't noted on the previous one, but I'll note here that these are both Habitat homes. And these are homes, if I have this correct, if I don't have it correct, Tucker, please correct me. But these are the first Habitat homes that are SHI qualified that we've gotten to in the process of helping Habitat SHI qualify their homes. So not just in placing these family, it is momentous moving forward. So any questions, comments, or thoughts on this application? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion. Brooke, your microphone's off.
Yeah, so move to approve closing cost assistance for the Reed family at 9B Benjamin Drive up to $15,000 pending final closing costs.
There's a second?
Second.
Second from Rima by roll call. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Shanta Murphy.
Abstaining as well on this one.
Okay, Brian Sullivan's an aye. With that will carry. We'll move to a covenant formation assistance application for the Davises at 11 Equator Drive. Are there any thoughts, questions, comments on this one? And is there anything that you can tell us about this application, about the land or the property or anything there?
I don't really know. The application was signed by the seller's counsel, assuring us of the ownership by the applicant. But I mean, I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but if you look, when we looked at the registry of deeds, it looks like there's a different owner, but the seller's counsel assures us that it's the owner that's listed in the application.
Okay. Haley, I didn't see anything in my packet. Am I missing something? Sorry, you just went to mute. There you go.
Oh, on Reed.
Yeah, oh, wait, there it is. I just didn't see a plan or anything. I just saw the one page from Housing Nantucket.
Yeah, so the application doesn't require that a plan be submitted.
Okay.
It's very minimal for CFAPs. If we want to include that in the future, we can definitely talk to Housing Nantucket and change. But yeah, that's why there's no plan.
Okay.
But I can also include that if that's something the trust would be interested in the future, even if it's not a requirement. Would that be helpful?
I don't know. I think more than just the single page, I think would be helpful, whether it's more the application items that are involved just to look at and review. Vicky?
The only question I wanted to raise is about the ownership of this property. And so if, I mean, I hadn't been, I'm not asked to usually do a title search for ownership, but if Anne has not been able to verify the owner of this property, you may want to, I mean, you could certainly vote to, if you want to proceed, but subject to being able to verify who the actual owner is. I don't know if that's something that you want to consider.
And who was counsel?
It was John Brescher. I mean, we looked at the map geo in our office and we see that it lists the Deutsche Bank as the owner. So then we went back to the town council or to the council for the seller and said, why does it show a different owner on the records, but you're saying that it's this other owner? And he said, I mean, I can read you his reply if that helps. I don't know how much into the weeds you want to get here, but he says, essentially, there was some foreclosure business happening, but at the end of the day, the foreclosure deed was wiped out by the order of the court, and Mr. Davis still owns the property per the original certificate of title. So that was the response.
So,
go ahead, Vicky.
So perhaps that is the case. I mean, if John's making those representations, again, a simple, I'd be happy to make a simple phone call or inquiry just to confirm the ownership, just because it didn't seem clear to you. But the record, again, I could also just take a look at the record title at the Registry of Deeds just to confirm. And please let me know, and I'm happy to do that for you.
Thank you, Vicky. Brooke, I saw previously you looked like you had a comment. Did it get answered?
I was going to comment that GIS shows it was owned by Deutsche Bank and it looked like a foreclosure situation. But my comment would be, I want to verify that the person who is requesting this loan is actually the owner. And because I think there's some risk to us that if we've granted a loan on a property to someone who doesn't own it, then we could be out that money.
Also,
I'd like to verify.
Okay.
We have the supporting documentation. If you don't mind me saying, I can forward that along to your town council, because that was what was submit after we asked the questions. They attached, basically, it's an order with the land court and some other.
And if you'll hold that thought right there, I just want to come to Tucker and Haley. Tucker, had your hand up.
I mean, I just was going to say something sort of in line with what Brooke was saying. I think any motion that we wanted to move forward with, we should make it subject to the satisfaction of town council regarding the ownership.
Okay. And then Haley, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that for the FAP applications, the only thing that is required for them to submit is the application and the qualified seller certificate. That's it. So it should be 2 pages. But I noticed now that what I got from Charlene, but I have on file here, I'm missing page 2 of the application. So I'm gonna have to get that as well. So that can also be part of, from Anne, I'll message Charlene, but it's the part that has the qualified sellers application. I mean, we have the qualified sellers certificate, so they've assessed that they are qualified. But if we want that second page for reference, it just has their attorney, their email address, and the address. But there's nothing about a land plan or any other materials they are supposed to submit to us.
Okay. So I'd like to put the idea out that we carry the item to the November 1st meeting, give Ann the opportunity to send the paperwork to Vicky, and then with the suggestion of town council, we can hopefully move forward with granting the application. It sounds as if we may need maybe a little more in the future, but let's take that up at a different opportunity. So with that, we'll leave this item open and carry it to the next meeting. Is that all, everybody? I got getting some positive head shakes. That work? Great. Sorry, I clicked away. 31 Fairgrounds, item number 6. So here we are for an update. I will open this with you, Anne, if you want to start the update or pass to Mr. Cassidy, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. And things are moving along there at 31 Fairgrounds. We got boxes. Feels like every day we're getting more stuff shipped to the site. And I know Billy has a lot more detail that he can provide to us. So I'll hand the mic off to Billy here.
Thanks, Ann. Actually, while this was just happening, to Ann's point, our trucker just sent a text and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 boxes on site in New Bedford, and he is heading back up to grab another one right now. So that would mean that we have building 2 on site. The foundation was just poured last week. We'll be backfilling at the end of this week. Building 4 is now entirely on site in New Bedford, which is one of the accessible buildings. Building 5 is partially on site in New Bedford. And building 6 is actually being constructed right now. Building 7, the last of the 8, is going online either the 26th or the 28th of this month. And it will be available for trucking leaving Maine just before Thanksgiving, which will likely wait until just after Thanksgiving. So the fur is beginning to fly. We're where we're, I had hoped to be last spring, but I think everybody is aware of all of the delays and so on and so forth. We don't need to go into any of that, but it's beginning to get pretty exciting. I will be giving some guidance imminently to some inflation pressures that have been felt. And without getting into specifics, I can say that it is less than 16% since the inception of the project. So I can't remember if that was the summer of 2019 or 2020, but overall, I don't think that is too bad. And Ann and I have some housekeeping to do regarding cash flows. Ann and I suppose. Other than that, it's going to begin to get exciting real quick. So,
thank you, Billy. I'll challenge you and say it's already exciting. Brooke.
So, Billy, is that are those cost increases already accounted for in your funding, or is there more funding needed?
No, they're not. We're going to require some more, and I'm not prepared to speak to it right now.
Okay.
Or I am, but I don't think that this is the place, right?
Well, why don't we save that for a more whole conversation that's fully documented out and we understand what it is, and we'll go from there.
Understood.
But we are already. Thank you for the update. Does anyone else have questions for Billy or Ann? Not seeing any, we'll close that item and let these guys.
I have one more thing I'd like to add. Pardon me, Sully, I just forgot. So the building that is up that was just set last week, building number 3, is actually going to be finished in the same cedar siding that buildings 1 and 8, which now currently stand, are. The rest of the buildings are shingled. Just a point of interest. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Billy. So with those updates, we're going to close 31 Fairgrounds. We moved 7 Amelia off the agenda, and we're going to come to item 8 on the year-round definitions and restriction discussion. A few weeks ago, I asked Haley to pull some existing boards within our community that work vaguely with the concept of year-round housing. And she checked in with Housing Nantucket and got their definition. She checked in with the tax office, got their definition, how they work with abatements, the land bank. Haley, there was one, we checked in with planning, but there is no actual definition written into the code. And then I think you went so far as to check in with some other communities off Nantucket. Can you share that aspect of your research?
Yeah, for sure. So I reached out to several communities that were sort of similar to us in size, and that I had knowledge that they also had, housing as a major issue, and that it was, resort vacation where this year-round versus seasonal is a thing. And I didn't hear back from everyone. I reached out to Oak Bluff, specifically Provincetown, Big Sky, Montana, Community Housing Trust, Winter Park, Colorado town as well. Provincetown, Mass said that it's difficult for them to enforce and define, and that they use 46 weeks as qualifying someone as a primary resident. And Oak Bluffs doesn't have a standard definition yet, but they are working with the Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank to draft legislation that uses year-round housing. And they were talking about the primary occupants reside 11 months or more. So no one resides less than 11 months would be considered year-round. But then there was also discussion in Martha's Vineyard as well with zoning reform, defining year-round primary residence as a minimum of 9 months. So they're kind of going between 9 and 11 months. Provincetown with 46 weeks, which is very similar to Housing Nantucket, which is the 10 out of 12. So it's similar in that. That's anecdotal because it's not a ton of communities, but I thought it would be at least some color to the research.
So the goal in this conversation is currently the zoning code has no definition. The variety of definitions throughout the different boards that we have here, if we're going to work to a place of creating a year-round covenant on properties, we need to start with the definition of what we're looking at. I think we need to look to Vicky and town council to really understand what we're able to define and for what kind of time period. Is it an expiring restriction? Can it be a forever restriction? And what it looks like and what does the community want? But if we do get to a place that there's a financial exchange for the restriction, we need to really define what we want this to look like and then make a move to get it put into the code somewhere. So with that, I'll open the floor and Vicky's got her hand up.
So a couple of things come to mind with this. First of all, Housing Nantucket already has defined it as 10 to 12 months. So there's some precedent, at least for the time being in the town, of using that. I don't know how much support that will have from other boards if we are going to try to establish a restriction that we're going to actually put in the code that's going to be the so-called definition of what year-round housing is going to be. So I think it would be helpful to speak with the planning department, to Andrew Vorse and to the planning department and planning board, perhaps, as to some of their concepts of what they view as definitions that would work in Nantucket for a year-round housing, so that you can get some support for that concept. So that's one thing. So the definition of year-round, I think, is something that we're going to have to try to establish and work on. And then we're going to need to, as you said, get that into the code, which would require, a change in the zoning bylaw. So that's a process that we would have to go through. The second thing is about restrictions in general. And I was asked to do some research just recently for Nantucket in another matter about looking at restrictions and terms. And so generally restrictions are held just for 30-year terms. If a party is going to have a restriction, they would have to, longer than 30 years, they would have to go and get extensions of that. And you would have to do that every 20 years. So it becomes very difficult when you're limited to that. However, as a governmental body, the town or the, well, in this case, it would be the town, could hold a restriction as a, quote, other governmental body. And under Chapter 184, Section 26, that restriction, which is held for public benefit by a governmental body, could be held in perpetuity. So if we are to impose those type of restrictions, we could basically do that in perpetuity under Chapter 184, Section 26. So that is a way to do that. And so if we're, say, going to purchase a year-round restriction from somebody, for instance, we would acquire the restriction under Chapter 184, Section 26, and we could hold it in perpetuity. And we would also be the enforcing body. The town would be the enforcing body to do that. So that's, I think, the mechanism for a way to do that. The question is the definition and how to come up with a definition that works for the town.
I think to your point, it's really important, Vicki, that there's some conversation with other boards, right? Or offices. The first and foremost in my mind is the assessor's office, because there's abatements given on year round, which is a financial component already. So they're working with some level of a definition there as well, which is critical to understand. So I'm not sure how we best move this forward. The various definitions that Haley pulled together that exist locally all have crossover, all have a little variance in them. But I'm not sure how to move the ball forward with such a large group. Brooke?
So the other group that's going to be tackling this question likely is the short-term rental work group. If there is an exemption for year-round occupied dwellings under any short-term rental limitations or restrictions. So it's a good time to be doing this before having this conversation, I think, across the community, and maybe finding the stakeholders and bringing them together to have a conversation together about where things are headed in different entities. And, even for Housing Nantucket, like, is it working for them at 10 months, or do they feel a need to amend theirs as well if we're going to go about defining this for the community? Or if it's working for them, do we just duplicate theirs and encourage other entities to come in line? And so we have a single definition across the community, so that's less confusing.
One place, while we're not necessarily talking about an affordability restriction, I think one place we haven't looked or talked about is what are any definitions that exist at DHCD, and do we need to apply those? Now that you bring that point up, Brooke, I had this big fat audacious goal that we were going to have a definition by December, and then the select board was going to be able to submit it for town meeting in April. But what you just said, like, gives me some pause that, you know, is this a special town meeting in the fall, or are we looking 2 years out to getting to a definition with this much community input? I don't know. I'm just trying to set a timeline and work backwards and be realistic about, while there are other interests in the community, I think this board is working feverishly to get to a place that we can enact some change with some potential funding and move forward in creating a secondary market. So what do we want to work with on a timeline and getting this definition move forward? With that, I'll turn to Meg.
I'm just curious, what in regards to, like, Tucker, your work with the housing stakeholders that you meet with once a month. I mean, I see that people have their different definitions of what makes someone year-round, and obviously they all have their own objectives, so they're going to differ slightly, but I don't know if it's feasible or possible to have that conversation within that work group and see if there can be some common ground, or at least a discussion about it, and then maybe we do make our own recommendation or not. But that was my thought.
That's a great idea. I can definitely bring it up at the next meeting, Meg.
I'd be curious, does anybody want to take a stab at what their opinions or thoughts are of what it should look like, as we're, you know, we've brought some outside concepts in. Are there any here? And then somebody just raised their hand and I saw it, and then the whole screen shifted. Brooke.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on what you said in terms of timeline. I'm not necessarily thinking we need to arrive at consensus across the community, but certainly talking to the people who define it different ways and sort of having that dialogue about what are the reasons they define it. So, you know, I mean, I can think of a scenario where you set it at 10 months and then you've got someone who's been here for 40 years and they want to go to Florida for 3 months in the winter when they're aging. Like, have we made that impossible for people? You know, just what are the consequences of the different choices and why different groups have chosen? I don't think it necessarily means we all have to agree to be the same, but that we should at least have everybody weigh in on the why of what they have and if they're happy with it before we define ours.
So with, okay, all right, I gotcha. And I agree with that, right? Like, it's interesting. I could go to the minimum requirement of what's the federal tax code say, right? 6 months and a day in a place, and that's where you claim your residency. You know, is there a voter registration? Is that your residency? Like, there's a multitude of different boxes that we can check, and what are important to this community and the people in it, and how do we kind of define that? So in theory, when you say, Brooke, we need to talk to the community, I guess my question is, how do we functionally move this conversation today to going to that, right? Like, we can create a subcommittee, work with Haley, put throw all the ideas at the wall, put a checklist, email it around to everybody, tell us what's important to you, get some feedback and read it. I don't know what the best way to get actionable to our next meeting so we can have something to move this forward is. And so that's my question of the group.
Tucker's hand's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Go ahead, Tucker.
Chantal's hand up her hand was up first.
Is it your actual hand or the little hand? I'm so confused at what's going on. Yes, Chantal.
My little baby hand over there.
Okay, there you go.
I was, as we're having this conversation, I was wondering about enforcement. You know, we've gone beyond this. We've defined it. Then what happens if, let's say, I purchase a home with that restriction, and I do next year, because now I have a home and I'm not worried about the instability of the Nantucket Shuffle, and I just want to go spend 3 months with my parents. Like, am I going to lose my home? Is there a financial penalty that goes with that?
I have one idea, but I want to hear Vicky's. Vicky?
Well, I don't have a specific penalty that you would be imposed, but I do, you know, that would be written into whatever we decide for a definition. That's going to be part of what's going to be in the code, is that, you know, if there's a year-round restriction that is being granted and the town is enforcing it, what is the penalty going to be? Like Housing Nantucket, I don't know, they have a certain penalty limit per day for I think if short-term rent, someone rents too long, or so that's really part of the definition, I think, and you have to sort of work that in. It can be, you're not going to, I don't think you would want to lose your home over it. Certainly, I think that becomes a little harsh. However, we would have the right to be able to enforce it, and that would be, we could terminate the restriction, I suppose, and they'd be subject to a hefty penalty, or there are a number of things that you can do. So, Brian, I'll return that to you because maybe you had a specific.
Well, like one idea that I would have, if you qualify for the definition and you collect a restriction, you're likely getting an abatement on your taxes. So that's the first opportunity to remove the abatement while you're in violation, and then per diem fines that could be liens, or there's a variety of methods we could create. I'm going to come to Haley, Meg, and Penny. Go ahead, Haley.
Sorry, this is not about the specific item, but someone just joined as iPhone and we need them to identify themselves, please, if you are here.
Thank you, Haley.
Yep. Thanks.
So I'm going to keep moving forward while we wait for iPhone to identify themselves. So Meg?
Tucker, did you want to say something or no?
Yeah, I was being chivalrous and then got overlooked.
Oh, you're right. You did. Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Meg. No, I just was going to say, like, it, and maybe I'm incorrect, but it feels like, part of what we're trying to do is to define this restriction with the potential that there is some monetary compensation associated with folks who are willing to put their property into a year-round restriction. Is that correct?
I think that's one function of it. I'm hopeful half the community just donates the restriction, but yeah, that would be.
Well, that would be fantastic. But assuming there are at least some folks where it's going to take monetary compensation, I mean, it feels like that we're probably, beyond, like we're going to need to go further than like 6 months and a day in order to make a credible case for the value of having this restriction. So anyway, it's just a comment. And I like what Meg brought up in terms of the stakeholders group, perhaps, just getting some initial thinking anyway from that.
Thank you, Tucker. Meg?
Yeah, I just wanted, being new to the group, I just wanted to ask, what would the objective of us defining the year-round definition, or making the year-round definition, like what is the actual objective of that? Obviously, we're not trying to collect taxes and it's 6 months plus a day, and we're not dealing directly with the short-term rental situation, like for the purposes of our trust having that definition. If you could just inform me.
If we get to a place that we were able to financially afford to buy restrictions from either existing homeowners or help new buyers with some sort of down payment restriction that would, down payment assistance that would accept a year-round restriction in perpetuity on the property, we would effectively be creating a secondary marketplace on Nantucket that was free market on price, on income, but whatever the year-round qualified group of buyers was willing to pay. You shaking your head. I just want to make sure we got that.
Yes. So you're saying the restriction, the definition of year-round would apply to the homeowner.
It would apply to who? It would apply to the home, and then the people who occupied the home, whether it was the incoming buyer or the existing homeowner who accepted it for a future situation.
Okay. I think I get it. Thank you.
Yep. Rima. Oh, wait, Penny had her hand up first. Sorry, Penny.
I apologize for being late. I won't bore you with the details. I feel like I want to be very cautious that we are clear about enforcement and who the enforcing authority is on all of this. This community has a history of putting things in place and then not enforcing them. I don't think this is a discussion we're going to complete at this meeting. Does it make sense to have a subcommittee of some sort? Yeah, Brooke is shaking her head. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Rima?
It occurs to me that probably there should be some kind of rental component to this as well. If there's a year-round restriction, is someone allowed to rent year-round to a resident and retain, you know, their status?
I think there's definitely a clarity between occupancy and ownership, and both of them being year-round.
Exactly. And the other thing is, you know, if this is going into the zoning code, then I expect that it would be enforced by the zoning enforcement officer or office. I don't know if there's just still one person, but that seems to be, you know, when we get into zoning, we really do need to talk to planning about this.
I think Vicky has a recommendation or a thought on that. Vicky.
Well, so it depends how this restriction is going to be held. And if the town is going to take advantage of the fact that it can hold such a restriction in perpetuity, then you need a body that is enabled to be able to hold restrictions, which are real estate interests. So the select board is generally the body for the town that would actually hold the restriction and then would likely enforce it. So that would likely be the select board, unless the zoning ordinance had some other enforcing agent. So I just caution taking, you know, you have to think about who's holding this restriction. And by the way, the trust has the ability to hold real estate interests. So if the trust were thinking of doing that, they possibly could do that if they wanted.
I'd like to get to a place where we're kind of chunking this down a little bit. Like, let's work on definition, then let's work on restriction, and then let's work on body that's going to do it and help us to like pare this down. Because when we talk about it collectively, it's a massive scenario and it's going to take a while to roll out. Brooke, I do see you, but Haley, I want to come to you. I've messaged iPhone and they haven't responded. I don't know how we continue.
Yes, so I also have messaged iPhone. iPhone, if you can unmute and tell us who you are, I will change your name. Otherwise, I will have to, I think, take you off of the meeting because it is a requirement.
Don't take me out.
It's Billy.
It's Billy.
Okay. I was driving and I couldn't hit the proper button. So anyway,
mystery solved. Okay, very good.
So
Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you.
All set. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. Brooke, back to you.
So may I suggest that we ask if there's members of this group who would be willing to work on this project, and then we could Tucker and I could help identify who they might hold a meeting with, or maybe they come to a housing stakeholders meeting and we invite some additional people to that, or, you know, something of the sort to have a preliminary conversation about this and then bring the learnings from that back to this board in a timely manner. Maybe try to do it, you know, in the next, by maybe in a month from now. Or quicker, if it could happen by November 1st.
That's a great suggestion. I echo Brooke's suggestion and call for hands to be raised.
I'll work on it.
All right, so we have 4 on the subcommittee.
Then I will take the name out.
Meg, Shanta, I raised my hand because I'm pretty energetic and fired up about this right now. So I'm all for November 1st deadline. Haley, get ready. I'm coming in hot. All right, so we'll move the rest of this discussion to November. And ladies, Chantal, Meg, let's connect after the meeting on when works for the two of you. Next item, rental incentive. Go ahead, Brett.
Process question, Vicky, do we have a problem if they're a group of 3 from a open meeting law?
Not a majority. We're
but
seven.
my understanding is if it's 3 or more, it's subject to open meeting law.
Right, I think it is. I'll have to check on it for you, and I can double check with you and let you know. I don't want to commit you to it, but I think so. Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I would love to get
So ladies,
that.
let's not talk until we hear from Haley. Perfect. With that, thank you, Brooke. With that, we'll move to item 9, year-round rental incentive program discussion. So, who put this on? Tucker? Haley? Haley, let it rip.
So this is by way of Tucker, but there was an article going around about Sedona, Arizona, and other resort towns that have programs where the government will pay a homeowner to rent to someone either 6 months out of the year or a full year or more. And the idea is to pay that person to rent to year-rounders or seasonal instead of short-term. So that's why it's 6 months to a year. So I apologize, I didn't label the graph, but the graph with the on page 15 of the packet with the blue on the top, that is different communities that are similar to Nantucket. I noted the nightly price of a hotel because private rentals are very difficult to get that information reported out in an average, but comparing it to Nantucket, and then there's information on how much the government in those towns are paying the property owners to lease to year-rounders 6 months or more. And then there are different restrictions in terms of who can rent them. So it might be AMI level, there might not be any restriction. There might be a restriction on how expensive the rent can be that they pay. And some of the information is not available, but it kind of gives a picture of the other communities that are similarly expensive in terms of resort towns, and what programs are working in those areas.
Sorry, I'm pausing. I'm just trying to find page 15. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Does anybody have any questions, comments while I look for this page?
I think it's page 37 in the packet. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at the public packet. I apologize.
37. Brooke, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of all opportunities to get some housing moved from the seasonal to the year-round market. I think the biggest pushback we're going to get for the community is from the people who are already renting to year-rounders, saying, why am I not getting help when I've been doing the right thing all along? So that's just, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but we can anticipate that kind of response, I think.
Well, can we include that group?
Well, then what's the pool of money we need?
Well,
yeah,
we have a $400 to $500 million problem. Like, where are we finding it? Let's I'll throw that out there. Jason, if you're listening, we have a $500 million affordable housing problem on Nantucket. You make that tomorrow's headline. So we've got to find the money somewhere. But I agree with you, bro. Meg?
Just want to fully support this concept. Anecdotally, everyone I talk to who has a house, who rents, and who makes the difficult choice to rent seasonally because they can't afford not to, and then rents to a family for the other 9 months of the year. This feels like such a brilliant idea. And I've heard people talk about this in the past. I mean, $20,000 a family will make the difference between renting your house, 3 months for $3,500 a week, and then 9 months for $3,500 a month. So if we can find funding, I just want to put my 2 cents out there. I fully support it.
So what are the steps to get this enacted, right? We need to define year-round occupancy or how you're qualifying. So step 1, we talked about previously. Step 2, we need to present this concept to town meeting to get some funding on it specifically on an annual basis. And then how do we define, or how was it defined what it's worth for each house. Is it bedroom count? Is it bedroom bath count? Is it total square footage? Is it, I don't know what that looks like, but how do we define? It seems like those are the 3 steps to get this to move it forward. Does anybody have any thoughts on how to tackle each one of those? We talked about the first one, which is definitions. We'll have a subcommittee shortly. Brooke?
I mean, I think the trick here is you don't overanalyze it. You start with something and you call it a pilot program and you throw a few $100,000 at it and offer it to 10 families at, you know, with an average of X dollars, depending on, I would think it would be bedroom count would be, you know, up to X dollars a bedroom. And then see who bites and see, you know, and if we don't, if nobody bites, then we know we've priced it too low or we've done something wrong. But maybe talk to some of the people that Meg's been talking to and ask them, what's the number? You know, where are you? Because I don't think it's every dollar they make over what the differential. I think it's covering a substantial portion of the differential, because I think Meg's right. There are people who who would prefer to rent year round to someone they know who lives here, who's part of the community. And
there's I think there's an education process too, right? There's a massive headache factor, but then all of the interim costs that aren't well calculated that that a year-round tenant pays for versus a vacation tenant, whether it's cable, electric, lawn mowing, trash, water, like what do those break out and look like for a year-round tenant versus a weekly vacation or seasonal tenant? So I think there's kind of a breakdown in education on what those 2 things look like as well. Go ahead, Brooke.
And there's a lot of questions going around about liability insurance for short-term rental. Most people are not insured to do short-term rentals, and they're not covered the way they think they are. So they are assuming some risk that is very different from getting insurance to rent year-round. It's a different insurance marketplace, as I'm learning. And so some education around that risk also. And then, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's things that you can ask a tenant to pay for that you're covering when you're doing a seasonal short-term rental. So that's an interesting part of it. I mean, but again, let's not overanalyze it. Let's start with a number that seems to be logical and see where it goes.
Meg?
In terms of the enforcement and the protocol, why don't we reach out to like Tahoe and Sedona and Kauai and these other places that may have these types of programs and see what they're doing so we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Haley has her hand up, and I think she may have done that with one of the communities so far. Haley?
Oh, yes, Meg, I think that would be good for there to be more information about exactly how they do these process, because I really just have kind of the restrictions and how much they pay out and kind of that kind of thing. So that would be good. I just wanted to note something that I found interesting in my research that it's not included in the graph, but it was reading about one specific community, was that, you know, there was questions about how does this regenerate? Because if they only sign for a year, will they go back to short term? And then will this person be out of housing? And then you have the same problem over and over again. And I think that would be something that the work group or whoever is, you know, the trust talk about and think about. But also anecdotally, I did read that several landlords who started it said like, well, it's just easier. These tenants are really responsible. I've already done this. So they're not getting paid again the next year to continue it, but they've decided to continue it anyway. So just something to note.
Member of the public sent a message wanting to include in the conversation, include people, this is from Mary Mack, include people that are already renting in the program, renting year round in the program as an incentive to continue doing so. And so to your point, Brooke, you know, there is a voice in the community that wants to be credited for existing good work. Go ahead, Brooke.
And maybe the commitment is longer than a year.
Right.
You know, I mean, maybe we could do it for 2 years or do it, you know. I mean, I think the other challenge, and I don't know, this is a bit of a legal question, is when we get involved in stuff like this, where is the town and the Affordable Housing Trust sit in the tenant landlord relationship legally? And if there's, you know, a need for eviction because of tenant behavior, like where does that come out? And I don't want to, again, I don't want to overanalyze it, but it's just something we need to think about when we get in the middle of a tenant landlord relationship, because it, you know, I have anecdotally heard from people, they went to short-term rentals because they had a bad experience being unable to move a year-round tenant out when things were not going well. And you know, it's a tenant's right state. And so a lot of landlords moved away from year-round rentals for that reason as well. So that's another little bit piece of the puzzle.
Thank you, Brooke. Penny?
Yeah, just two things. Conversely to what Brooke just shared with us, we've also seen a lot of people moving from short-term rentals, which might be the goal as it gets more difficult, to year-round and either seasonal and winter rentals. And then secondarily, Housing Nantucket has had some experience with people violating the terms of their occupancy by doing rentals and not occupying things year-round. And just from outside looking in, it seems to me that the enforcement of that and subsequent resolution is very, very difficult. And I don't think the Affordable Housing Trust should be in the business of that. Just a comment. Thank you.
Vicki?
So it would seem to me that the rental arrangement is actually between the landlord and the tenant and not the, like say, the trust. And so if we're not involved in that particular relationship, I mean, the lease would actually be between the landlord and the tenant. And, you know, if the landlord had to get them out, that's part of the risk that they assume when they're renting to, you know, a tenant. So it's different than if we were actually trying to enforce a restriction. You know, so if we had a year-round restriction for which we've paid someone to acquire that restriction, that's a different type of enforcement, I would view it, than a lease enforcement restriction where you're trying to get the tenant out. So I think they're two different
things. Thank you, Vicki. Member of the public, Mr. Cassidy.
Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking about what Vicki just said. In fact, if an entity held a deed restriction that had a life of 10 years, you could finance this through low-income housing tax credits.
That's oh, interesting. We'll have to dig into that. Thank you, Billy.
You're welcome. I gotta quit. I can't use this thing.
I'm not sure if that was a statement or you're continuing, but I'm going to move on because I think you just muted yourself. Haley, go ahead.
Very quickly, just to what Vicki was saying and Penny, I just had a thought of like, there is, you know, some level of potential monitoring, because if you pay somebody, let's say $20,000 and say you're going to lease year round, you know, what's stopping them from breaking the lease and then continuing to do a short-term rental, unless there is a monitoring to make sure that that's not happening. I think that wouldn't hopefully happen, but I'm just thinking about what Penny said, and, you know, the trust doesn't want to be necessarily the agent who is that monitoring system, it sounds like, I assume.
So I'm seeing the first or one part of the request at town meeting for funding to expand the office for enforcement. So that's the first thing I'm reading into this.
That's something that you said, and I would agree that you said that would be an option. Yeah.
Well, this has come out of both of
the
conversations that we're having. Is there isn't an existing entity for either of these two things, a definition of year-round or this.
Right.
Meg, my screen just shifted, but that was you. You had your hand up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would not the year-round tenants be like a built-in mechanism for confirming that these were continued year-round rentals? You know, we have their names in a Google spreadsheet, and then we send out a little affidavit or something like, are you being rented to year-round? Sign it. If they're not, I'm sure they're going to let us know.
That's a great thought, like, because they're the ones being housed and they want to be there. So that's the best accountability one. Chantal, then Penny.
I agree with that to an extent. I think that if people want to finesse the system, they'll find a way around it. Like, I can rent to my best friend who lives somewhere else just to collect the money, and I have her confirm every month that she's staying in my house. You know, so I think it needs to be something with a little bit more strength behind it than that.
Penny.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting into the details of this in a way. It's an interesting conversation, but I think there's a lot more groundwork that has to happen here.
Agreed. And my thought 2 speakers ago is to bring this to the higher level of what are the programs in these conversations that we can put more heads in beds, both shy qualified and not, for a long period of time. And I don't know if we've got to kind of create a prioritization and then cost on each to work our way through from lowest to highest, and let's move the ball forward. Brooke?
I also believe, and Vicky can verify this, if we're using trust funds, there has to be an income restriction somewhere in it, right? I mean, we could set that really high, but can we subsidize rent with trust funds if there's no income restriction?
Well, we're aiming to I guess we're looking to try to also do that in our definitions of what we want to accomplish, you know, as far as the trust. And so maybe we need to think about how, you know, whether 240 AMI is what we want to say, or do we want to say something different so that it can allow for support for housing at a higher rental rate than just 240% AMI. I think that's a consideration for what you want to do as far as changing the definition and the purpose for the trust.
Here's a quick question on that note, and I do agree that we got into the weeds and I don't want to stay there anymore, but we know we don't have any money for any of these programs right now. And if there are efforts to acquire money to fund these particular programs, can the money be directed to the trust and not restricted by a program that wasn't restricted by an AMI level? We currently work with 5 buckets of money now. Can we add another bucket? We'll leave that question to be answered in the future, not contemplated. With that, I think we'll kind of close this conversation. I'm not necessarily sure how we're moving this forward. Maybe there's another subcommittee opportunity to jot down some more ideas and bring this back to us. Does that sound reasonable? Does anybody want to work on this in the interim and spend some time with Haley maturing it out? Brooke, that's a question, statement or volunteer? Volunteer. Okay, great. We have 1. Anyone else? Great, Meg, thank you. Okay. So we'll stay with 2 at that. I'll close this item, move to the next one. Warrant article, codify income limits served by the trust. What a great segue that was. Item number 10. So if I have this right, this discussion is, are we prepared to change our enabling legislation to raise our AMI income limit? And is there anything else that we would want to change in the enabling legislation, since we'll need to go back to town meeting in April with it? And then my only question is, what is our deadline that we have to submit our own article by? December, January? Brooke? You reversed, you.
I realize if we bring it to the select board to sponsor the article, we have until mid-January or so.
Okay, great.
If we were to do it on our own, it would probably be a citizen warrant article, which is November 15th, which is not viable. So we would have to craft something that would get support at the select board level, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brooke. Penny?
Just quickly, through you, Brian, to Brooke, it's also planning board that can submit in January, right? So the two.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I think on the table is the question about AMI level and the number that we want to go to. Tucker, do you have any direction in this part of the conversation you'd like to share with the group?
Well, I think this is something that town council had brought up in terms of our work in wanting to codify the levels that we serve. And I think the prior discussion, around simply a year-round restriction, and if there were some funds associated in trying to obtain that restriction, can those funds come from the trust? And if so, what changes would we need in order to allow that?
Is there any board members that comments, questions on that? Okay. Seeing none, I'm not sure how to steer this conversation.
Well, I think it's driven by these other conversations we're going to have to some extent, right? About defining a year-round restriction and about, do we want a rental subsidy program that exceeds,
So to your previous point, Brooke, do we pick so we get to the table at April, do we pick a number and get it started and move along? Do we not pick a number and get it started and move along? Is in hopes that we're, having a fruitful discussion with the select board near term, and then they're submitting an article. Tucker?
Yeah, just forgetting whatever number we end up picking. I mean, I think this was originally, I think Vicki has talked about before how, the trust is charged with serving low to moderate. We've always kind of had our own self-definition of moderate. We've received monies in various buckets that come with a restriction of up to 200% AMI on the high end. And I think that, Vicki had suggested that it would be good, regardless if we're changing the level that we want to serve, codifying, let's say, the level up to which we presently are serving. So Vicki, I don't know if you want to add anything here, but to me, whether we changed our current upper limit or not, I had taken what you've shared in recent meetings as we still need to do something. Is that accurate, or?
Well, I think it would be helpful to have some kind of designation limit, some kind of definition of the up to what income levels we do want to serve. Only because we get into these situations with, I know I've been in conversations with bond counsel, I've been in situations with drafting these warrant articles, and it comes down to, well, who can this money be used for? And without having a specific designation, and we're limited to low and moderate income. I mean, if you look at low and moderate income in the statutes in Massachusetts, there's a number of different definitions, and DHCD has a number of different definitions, and they're much lower, quite frankly, than what is considered low and moderate in Nantucket. And so I think it would be helpful to consider trying to implement some kind of definition of the population that you're looking to serve, and perhaps not just limit it to a specific level, but say a specific income level or use of specific types of programs that will benefit the rental housing. There are different ways. I'm just sort of like thinking off the top of my head, but something
comes
that,
back to that year-round definition we're trying to find.
right, exactly.
Put that in, or
right,
240
exactly.
income.
Yeah, and so I think that I think it behooves us to think about how you want to define that, and I think that there definitely is a need for something, only because I think the more articles that we try to draft for warrant articles and the more projects that we try to do, we always are cognizant of, are we exceeding our ability to be able to use that money for certain income levels.
The most important thing I captured out of that, and Brooke, I'll come to you in 1 second, is our ability to get funding at the bond level is directly tied to this. So all of our articles relate back to funding. So,
well, all of
ahead,
the, I'm sorry. I just was to say all of the bonding articles, you know, have this, in recent years, have this upper limit, you know, 200. There's nothing that we have done to date actually that has funding for an income limit that is above the 150 level, actually, which would be 31 Fairgrounds Road.
No, I'm just saying, Tucker, more along the lines of, if you know, somebody underwriting a bond is more interested in a wider category here than the lower.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Vicky.
So, you know, I'm starting to get asked repeatedly by bond counsel, you know, to provide opinions to make sure that we're complying with what the trust is allowed to do. And so, you know, they're looking at the trust's charter. They're looking at our warrant articles. And so I think it behooves the trust to have something more defined, rather than trying to walk a fine line.
Thank you, Vicky. Brooke?
So as I understand it, the conversation at the state level on the housing bank has thrown a 240% AMI number out. Is that right, Tucker? Is that still?
I mean, that's in our legislation.
In our, okay. So
yeah.
It's in our home rule petition. So I would strive to do something along the lines of, you know, the scope of our mission is to fund housing for Nantucket residents making up to X% of AMI, and or who reside on Nantucket on a year-round basis, and maybe we throw in whatever definition we come to, so that gives us the leeway to do something at a higher level that's just for year-round. Without an income restriction. And then bond counsel will determine, like, is it taxable, non-taxable, et cetera, depending on, you know, the income levels and, you know, all those kind of complex questions. But that we leave open the opportunity that it is that if it's occupied year round, it doesn't have to have an income restriction on it.
Vicky, if we collectively say that that's what we're looking for now, is that enough to put it together in kind of an editing format that we can send it on to the select board and say, this is what we're considering for a change to our enabling legislation? Unfortunately, you muted.
Sorry. Yes, I think that we can start to put together some form of a warrant article that would give them something to look at. Yes, I mean, I could try to have something ready based upon these comments. I could try to have something ready for the November 1 meeting if you'd like.
Okay.
Be good.
I think Penny has a comment, and I just want to get a sense of the members if that's the direction they want to go. Penny?
Yeah, just one last question. Circling back to what Brooke just said. I mean, if this is to be kept affordable, it has to be tied to income, no?
Well, that becomes the question, Penny. Do we want to open this conversation in this board to opportunities that are year-round and or affordable?
No, I feel very, very strongly it has to be tied to income, especially given what happened in this community in the last 2 years, pandemic driven. There were people paying crazy amounts of money to be here year round. That's it.
Okay. Vicki?
So one last consideration too is that the trust is a municipal, it's a municipal housing trust created for the purpose of affordable, low and moderate income housing. And so we need to try to find a way to keep in line with what the statute, has. So if you want to say what low and moderate income housing is for Nantucket, that's perhaps a way to go. I mean, you can't just say low and moderate income housing and then you're subject to what is low and moderate income housing in different communities other than Nantucket.
So you're saying we could define moderate income as the average price in the previous calendar year as stated on Nantucket, Massachusetts, like something along those lines. Like, unfortunately, right now, the average price is like $3.5 million or some crazy number.
Right.
But you want to gear it towards low and moderate income. So what is low and moderate income on Nantucket?
I don't know what moderate is. Like, I don't know how to define that.
Right.
Rima's had her hand up for quite a bit.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I was going, that we have to be able to make a case for what we consider moderate income given our housing market. And so then we can offer covenant homes to people, that are maybe at 240. So I don't know where 240 came from, but that sounds like the number that's being bounced around. And if we can make that case, then we have a leg to stand on when we say, what moderate is for Nantucket. But I guess it's based on housing prices over the last 10 years, 5 years. Okay.
Thanks, Rima. Tucker, then Penny, then Brooke.
Well, so 240 originally comes from Aspen, which started with that level like decades ago. And I was going to say that I think I like Vicki's suggestion of, being able to take a look at a draft all together at the November 1st meeting. I would suggest that we maybe take what comes out of that meeting and get some feedback on it from Senator Sear and maybe some of the other Cape and Islands legislative delegation. I was in a meeting yesterday with a bunch of them, including Rep. Peak from Provincetown, who's part of leadership. I mean, she's talking about 280% AMI as being part of the population that we want to serve in the Cape and Islands. So, I mean, I agree with Penny in terms of having an income limit. I think is an important thing. But I think we may want to float this out to some of our legislative delegation when we're ready and get some input so that we know it's going to get a good reception up there.
Penny?
Yeah, just Mike, I think we throw around these percentages. We also should remind ourselves of what they equal. And Tucker, is it still 129,000 is AMI?
136, 100.
136, okay. So 240 of that is in excess of 300,000.
I think that's an interesting, like, we should look at that chart. Haley, if you
can we should just not get too caught up.
Meeting.
Right, we should get.
Yeah, like, what's 150?
Talk about the real numbers.
Let's chart it out in 25 units up to 300, just so everybody's looking at the same thing. Brooke, then Meg.
Yeah, so I just did the math. If you do 240% of 136 multiplied by 30%, which is the ideal cost of housing, that comes out to $8,000 a month available for housing cost. So I'm not a mortgage broker. I don't know what that's, that's a lot of money for a rental, and I don't know what it buys you for a mortgage.
I just want to point out that the unintended consequence of something like that is if you raise the subsidized rental rate to $8,000 a month and you're providing rental instances, the price of real estate is going to go up dramatically quicker. The unintended consequence of the whole thing.
Potentially. So,
and of course,
just point of clarity, 136 AMI is for a family of
4.
4. Okay.
And then,
you know what? Actually, with the rising rates, it may actually be feasible and affordable.
Well, I mean, you have to. I mean, when the median home price here was 2.8 million 2 months ago, and Brian's suggesting it's now even higher, you had to be earning $530,000 a year to afford the median home here. So even though we're talking about, it seems like, 240, 280 is a lot in some ways. It's actually not in some ways.
In the context of Nantucket, and you're absolutely right about that, but we're not talking about buying, we're talking about renting.
Well, we're talking about the limits we want to operate.
Sure.
Not that we have to serve to that level, but like, what is the limit we want to serve, potentially be able to serve up to?
Yeah, and the median right now is 2,958.
so the $8,000 a month at 6% interest with a 20% down payment, you're looking at a purchase price of $1,750,000. So, and I think Penny, correct me if you have it open, but there's what, 9 listings somewhere in that price range, sub $2 million.
Under 2 million, it was 19 yesterday, I think.
God, she's good.
And that's everything. No, I'm not good. I'm statistic driven. Anyway, that was yesterday, and it was land, one covenant, one commercial, and the rest residential.
So at minimum, this percentage, this number 240 AMI that we're talking about is not achieving a lot of market percentage, but so I think we continue this conversation. We request the chart, Haley, of what percentage is equal to income. Maybe we can calculate those out to, cost of existing real estate with traditional mortgage financing. And you and I, I'm happy to walk through that with you. And we bring that back for the November conversation. Vicki, I think you had some scope of how to write it out and bring it back to us. So then, we can kind of go from there. Yes, Haley.
Just to clarify, so I have the chart of up to 150% AMI. Would you like me to do it out for families of 1 to 6, I think is what it is, for up to 240% AMI?
Go to 300.
300?
Yeah, go to 300. Okay. So if it's 240, do 275 and 300.
Okay.
Just so everybody's looking at, and it's in the record somewhere so we can see.
Sure. Yeah.
We're looking at real dollars.
Yep.
Feeling like that conversation came to an end, we'll move to item 11. Funding for 7 letters. Discussion and approval.
So, well, seven letter. We actually don't have to approve it today, but I wanted to, this is the group you all will remember that we worked with last year on getting the transfer fee legislation moved forward at the State House. The Vineyard, the 7 letter is the communications and strategy firm. The Vineyard engaged the sister firm, which is the lobbying firm called O'Neill and Associates. The Vineyard is engaging that same firm again this year. And obviously it would be beneficial to engage the 7 letter folks as well alongside them. So I'm going to get details from them that we can have in our packet for the next meeting, and we can, you know, take it up as a approval item then. But I wanted to introduce the topic today and just see, you know, if there was any initial feedback on the desire to continue moving forward. I can report that yesterday I was invited to attend a roundtable with Mayor Driscoll from Salem, who is the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor, along with a good portion of the Cape and Islands legislative delegation. Senator Sear hosted the meeting, Rep. Peake, Rep. Fernandez, Rep. Diggs were all there. And Mayor Driscoll, you know, works on the ground running a municipality, and she very much sees the value of a transfer fee and is supportive. I would say the legislative delegation and the roughly 16 other attendees were the legislative delegation was definitely interested in moving this forward. They see an opportunity to do it in the new session. And obviously, you know, when we're talking about the kinds of money that would be associated with some of the things that we just were discussing, you know, having a reliable revenue source is key. So last year, I think it was a monthly fee of $7,500 a month. I wouldn't expect that to change during the course of the engagement. For the 7-letter side, it was the same on the O'Neill side. And I guess that's all I can, you know, happy to answer any questions, but I think that the group did a good job for us. They're well positioned. And I think it would be important that we continue to support this effort in the next session. Again, we don't need to vote today, but I just would love to hear a little, you know, some people's thoughts.
Penny?
Of course, I have a question through you, Brian, to Tucker. Tucker, what is different about this time? I mean, what is going to stop the Mass Association of Realtors from killing this repeatedly?
Well, I think that Healy and Driscoll have both expressed support for getting this done. I think what likely would end up happening, which isn't necessarily going to be welcome news for all of the communities that have been part of the effort, is there likely will be like some hurdles that a community has to have gotten over in order to be able to access the transfer fee. Things like that you're using CPA funds in a material way to support housing efforts, that you have the maximum short-term rental fee in place, and that, you know, some of those dollars are going in a material way toward addressing housing efforts, that your zoning allows certain things by right, such as ADU, multifamily, et cetera. So, I mean, we check all the boxes. So from our point of view, I think those are all reasonable things to say. I mean, we met with Ryan Castle a year ago, and at that time, that's what he basically said, is I don't want to see communities reaching for the transfer fee first, you know, if they're not using the other tools that are available to them. So
that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rima?
Yeah, Tucker, for new members, could you explain how these funds are used? Because, you know, we aren't allowed to pay lobbyists, but this pays for another, is it outreach? And the other thing is the fact that we do have a new Speaker of the House, right? Or a new Speaker.
We got a new speaker last year, so it will be the same speaker most likely as last year from Quincy, Speaker Mariano. He's you know, he's a Democrat, but you know, sort of a middle of the road, maybe even fiscally conservative. He you know, by background, I think he was a teacher at one point. He certainly understands the issues around, you know, housing, our essential services, and other folks, and you could just hear the chorus yesterday from everyone in the room, and this was not all housing advocates. This was president of the you know, Barnstable City Council, and realtor, the president of the Cape and Islands Realtors Association. I mean, there was a wide range of viewpoints represented, but I think, you know, on the Cape and Islands, there is a real tangible feeling around the loss of community, and that this is really an existential issue for, you know, all of us. So to answer your first question there, Rima, around what are we paying for? So we're paying the communications and strategy folks, and that's what Seven Letter does. So they do a lot with you know, getting our stories into publications that in particular legislators, but the general public as well, would read. And to, you know, so there was a story in the Boston Globe last year that they were very much involved with. There have been op-eds in the Boston Business Journal and other newspapers. They have gotten pieces placed in the State House News, which is something that every legislator reads. I mean, there's another effort going on around housing funding that's known as the HERO Coalition. It's kind of a two-pronged piece of legislation that is intended to address both housing and climate change through doubling the current deeds excise tax, which hasn't been raised in decades. It's, you know, in my own opinion, it's nice, but, you know, it would raise 150 million for housing, but it would be administered by the State Affordable Housing Trust. And even if they were divide it up like equally amongst all 351 municipalities, we'd get like $450,000. It's not going to move the needle here. And it's unlikely that we would be the recipients of it, frankly. So, I mean, it's great, but it's not what's going to solve our problem. So these folks, again, you know, work alongside their sister firm in terms of the lobbying, and Jeremy Crockford, who is their lead person at Seven Letter, is a very highly respected guy. I mean, he is able to get our story into the right places.
Tucker, thank you for the summary. My question is, we were an early adopter and excited to be involved with the coalition and the group. Have others kind of joined on since that time period? Is the group and the overall supportive communities kind of coming together over the last year to endorse this effort?
Oh, yeah. Well, so, you know, we're part of, well, I should mention, just to remind folks, last year, you know, the trust put up basically 50% of the money, and then the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers put up the other 50% for the funding toward this 7-letter effort. Now, we don't know whether the real estate group would be in position to do that again or not, but that certainly was appreciated. And it was powerful, frankly, for me to be able to say that in the room yesterday with Mayor Driscoll, that our realtors are paying to get this through. So, but in terms of the statewide effort, Brian, a couple of things that, we're part of the statewide effort, which is known as the Local Option for Housing Affordability Coalition, LOHA for short. And LOHA got, this whole effort got a lot of attention last year. The HERO folks actually invited us to a recent call as they strategize about whether to resubmit or not, basically saying, the transfer fee definitely generated the most buzz in the State House last year. And they're trying to figure out how can they align with us on what we're trying to get done. But in addition, the LOHA effort was coordinated out of the Somerville mayor's office last year. Now there are 2 large, very politically well-connected organizations that likely will be the co-coordinating entities for this statewide effort this session. One is MAPC, the other is MLRI, Mass Law Reform, and they are both excited about being involved with this, and the fact that they are excited speaks to their feeling about the likelihood of success. Now, success may not be for everyone. Who know? I don't know what'll happen in the legislature, but it's sort of hard to envision something passing there that doesn't include like the Cape and Islands in Boston. But hopefully it's broader than that. But obviously, our interest starts here.
Thank you, Tucker. Any more questions or thoughts for Tucker on this? And you just kind of want to get a temperature of, are we continuing to support this? You're not looking for an allocation of money. There happens to be a full member NARAB meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. Is there any discussion of this for that group?
If I could, ask you and Penny, Brian, but if
sorry, Penny.
If NARAB was willing to make any continued contribution toward this effort, I think actually regardless of amount, it says something. So okay. Yeah.
All right. So I have the misfortune at the moment of being the president of NARAB, and it's not going to be in the best interest of this group if we bring this up tomorrow. I'm happy to bring it up in November.
Great.
Is that too late?
No, it's definitely not too late, but I'm hoping at our November 1st meeting, this group could vote, to fund the entire effort. I have a question into Brian Turbot, whether we can do it or not. I'm hoping the answer is yes. But if we can fund the entire effort, I'd like to at least have that commitment, and then that could be offset by anything that NARAB did subsequently.
Yeah, and it wasn't just NARAB. You had other individuals from the real estate business that
I'm sorry.
Contributed.
Yeah, correct.
In this. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Brooke?
So basically, we would be voting to double our financial commitment in the hopes that it would be offset by some other donations, correct?
Yeah, so we would be voting to spend roughly 70,000.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll speak for myself personally. I'm interested in continuing this conversation, hearing more, understanding what other resources we can find. And I think we want to continue the effort at the State House personally. I got four more thumbs up on that one. So with that, I think that's enough to close this item and move on to the next thing. Okay. Back to the other business, upcoming meetings. Item 12, regular meeting, November 15th at 12:30. We also have the scheduled meeting for November 1st, which I believe is 12:30 as well, Haley. And that invitation's already in my calendar, I think.
Correct.
All right. Anybody have any other business?
Just I have a question. Is the first just a special meeting, interim meeting? Is that the RFP meeting?
That's the RFP meeting, yes. And we're also going to potentially look at the changes to the enabling legislation that we may want to put into a warrant article. Okay, item 13, board comments. Seeing none, we'll close that. Item 14, executive session. So we do have some items for executive session today. So look for a motion to adjourn. Go ahead, Penny.
I was going to say, somebody else can do it this time.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
So I move that we close the open session to adjourn to executive session to deliberate on matters, Vicki, help me, related to insurance.
Consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of this public body.
Not to return to open meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have first motion by Brooke, second by Penny, by roll call. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
John Todd Murphy.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. See you there.